right, well, welcome everybody to another Bay Trail Confidential. I'm Rodney Paul, and this is our second show of our second year doing this. Hope you're all doing great tonight. I have to apologize. We have a poll. We had a poll for you, and the poll does not seem to be working. I don't like to make excuses for technology. But I tried to log in with a second device, and apparently Zoom does not like that. Give me a second. I'm going to get our slides going, and we will start the show. And the main thing I wanted to ask you guys in the poll was, have you been to the Middle Harbor Shoreline Park that we're going to be talking about today? So if you want to just go in the chat and tell us if you have or haven't been there, that would be great to see. We just would love to get kind of a sense of how many of you have been to this place. I've always been under the impression it's not well known, but we're going to make it a lot better known by talking about it tonight. We are brought to you by San Francisco City Guides. I'm really happy to have them host us, and thanks to you who donated to the organization. It's a nonprofit that offers tours of San Francisco and these Zoom programs, which have been great during this time of pandemic. This is what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be talking about the Middle Harbor Shoreline Park, which should actually be spelled with an A in the harbor, so apologies for that. We're going to talk about the king tides, and I would love to make that interactive. We're hoping that some of you will chime in and tell us about your experiences. We have a photo contest that involves pictures taken during the king tides that we'll be looking at. And we always start the show. Well, we'll have your questions at the end and comments. We always like to talk about where we have been on the Bay Trail, what we call Bay Trail cred. I have to tell you guys that this is Jim's. Jim's, yours hasn't changed from the last time you were on the show, which was about 6 or 8 months ago. But you've got, I consider this very good Bay Trail cred, Jim. You've been to a lot of different places along the Bay, and I know, like me, you are a cyclist. How are you doing tonight, Jim? Oh, you are muted. Yeah,
I'm great. This is my park. I'm happy to be here and introduce more people to it.
Yeah, I'm real excited about that. I'm joined by Ethel Konopka, my co-host. How are you tonight, Ethel?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
And Lee Huo of the Bay Trail Project. How are you doing, Lee?
Hi, everyone. Doing great. I'm excited about hopefully letting a secret out today to some people.
Yeah, that is our hope, is that maybe if you haven't heard of Middle Harbor, we're going to encourage you to go explore it for yourself. And if you have been there, try to get some of your friends to go, because it's a really special place. We're going to tell you why. This is my Bay Trail cred currently. I used to consider it impressive until last month, when we had the group of women who had been all the way around the Bay, including places that aren't really official Bay Trail. They're kind of intrepid. And if you want to see a recording of that show, that you can go to my website, and there's links to that recording. Bay Trail updates. The main thing I heard is about this bridge, the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. Many of you know that there is bike and pedestrian access on this bridge. Has been for a couple of years now, but that was threatened by a couple of things, one of which was the drought. And what I have heard from the Trails for Richmond Action Committee is that they believe that the rainfall we've received is alleviating the pressure that would have resulted in a water main going across the bridge. So we still have some folks that want that lane restored, not restored, but given to the drivers. But at least we only have to fight that fight on one front. So do we know of any other news, Lee or Ethel, Jim, that's come up in the last month about the Bay Trail?
Not really, but just to add on to what you were just talking about, the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, even if it did move forward, they were pretty much looking at trying to hang that pipe underneath the bridge instead. So I don't think it would have been an issue in the long run. But, you know, everyone should, I'd like to remind people that that path on the Richmond Southfield Bridge is a 4-year pilot project where we're kind of just finishing up the second year of it. Is to see how it works with the trail on there. And based off of the numbers and the other factors that are into that, it'll tell us whether or not we can keep that trail permanently there and open all the time.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be objective. I'm all for having that trail, and I encourage everybody take advantage of it. Let's use that thing so that it's not going to be hard to continue to keep it. Let's move on to this Middle Harbor Shoreline Park that we're introducing some of you to. I'm going to take a quick look at chat and just see if we had some thoughts on people who have been there or not.
Looks
Oh,
like
good.
there's more people who have not been there than people who have, although it's close, but more
That's what-
not.
That's kind of what I was expecting. I'm a cyclist, as many of you know, and I've asked friends of mine, you know, who ride, you know, do you go to this place? And many of them don't. But my wife Sarah and I, we love going there on our tandem. So some takeaways about the Middle Harbor. It's a great place for views and observing the port and for birding. So it's right next to the Port of Oakland. And in fact, it's administered by the Port of Oakland. And you can see those amazing cranes in action. We're going to talk a little bit about that. It's got very flat trails and good surfaces for those with mobility challenges. Rarely crowded. It's an important bird habitat. We will definitely talk about that. And I think it's because of that that dogs are not permitted at the Middle Harbor. Transportation, it isn't so easy to get to unless, like me, you're a cyclist or a pretty intrepid walker. So it's about a 1.6 mile walk from West Oakland BART. There is a good walking path connecting it to the Bay Bridge Trail and good safe bike access. I said on weekends just because there's not a lot of trucks around, but I'm going to show you in a second. There's a very safe way, even during the week, to get there, and it has plenty of parking. So here's our wonderful Bay Trail map card, and this is the Bay Bridge here. The Middle Harbor is right here, and if you were to bike, you might want to bike toward the Bay Bridge. And then there are trails that connect to Maritime Street, which has completely separate bike lane. And then this stretch here on 7th Street is really interesting. You actually go right by the BART tube right here, which I'd never actually seen before until I did that walk with some friends, not actually with that group of women that we interviewed last month. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then you end up here at the Middle Harbor. And then this is planned Bay Trail that hasn't been done yet. This shows you being able to come from West Oakland BART, but I will tell you that this stretch here, there's an underpass that's very dark, has some potholes. You know, I think some of us have done it, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And this is the map of the park. We're going to talk about some of this. We'll see, like there's wonderful birding in this area. But there's a lot of other things that are planned, and Jim, you're going to tell us about that. We've got some historic pictures we want to share. This is kind of what the area looked like back a ways, and there was this thing called the Mole of the Western Pacific Rail Line, which was where ferries, rail cars connected with ferries that would take people into San Francisco. And this is another view of that, these Oakland ferries. And then, Jim, why don't you tell us about this picture? Because this is pretty extraordinary.
All right. So I usually don't wear a fedora in the house, but I wanted to show that I agree with Rodney's taste, and I'll tip my hat to him.
Thank you, Jim.
This shows an aerial view taken, I'm not sure, probably around 1930, 1933. It's before the exposition that built Treasure Island. That's Yerba Buena in the foreground, and you can see Middle Harbor right in the center, and you can also see the Alameda, what became the Alameda Air Station, and the manner of construction. There are railroad berms that you can see. So the early transportation mode was railroads, and they just brought in heavy gear. The railroad itself helped settle it. And they built these railroad berms out into it. And then they basically dredged the harbor and stacked the dredge material behind those berms. So you can see it on both sides of the channel. You can see kind of sand that's emerged on the Alameda side and little beaches on the Oakland side. So this was done before the area was developed, but it shows you that this was once very shallow or part of the bay. And the photos like this are actually what gave me the inspiration. It was deepened for the World War II effort. And at that time, it was called the Naval Supply Center, and it was the transportation hub for all the Western Pacific, all the naval operations. But it basically wasn't used after World War II and kind of hung out there. It was briefly deepened and during the Vietnam War, and some activity came back, but it was turned back to the Port of Oakland, and we made it into 5 new modern terminal berths and a park and a restored habitat area. So this area in the center, if Rodney could put his arrow on it, is Middle Harbor. So that was once about 2 or 3 feet deep. It was deepened to 42 feet by the Navy.
Mhm.
And we filled it back in with dredge material to make habitat in the park.
Yeah,
I was at the Port of Oakland at that time. I ran the environmental department.
yeah, that's good. We're going to get into that story. It's pretty interesting, kind of how that came about. This is what it looked like when the Navy was running it. And it was called the FISCO, the Fleet Industrial Supply Center, Oakland. Finally got that. And this is another view of it. So this would be I think, Jim, these are the rail lines you were talking about going
Right.
by here.
So what are the dates on those pictures?
This would be probably World War II or so, but Jim, this stayed a Navy, it was run by the Navy until I think around 1995. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was closed. It was closed and did not go through the base closure process. So when was Clinton's second election? Right after
96.
So it was given back to the port about 96 or 97.
And speaking of 97, I think this is a picture of you from about that time. And
And I had hair.
this would be the before picture. This is also a story about, like, it's a lot of hard work that goes into creating a park. And, Jim, you still look great, but you look different, right? And here's a quote from Jim. I really like this, and I wanted to read this. This is from 1997. So this is like before this whole thing gets built. He says, the goal of the Middle Harbor project is to use the fill from the port's dredging project to create a wetland similar to what existed around 1900. The habitat will restore fish and fowl habitat and dramatically improve public access to the waterfront. So this is what you kind of laid out as a vision for the park. Jim, looking at it today, like, how do you feel about how did you do reaching that vision?
Well, as they say, the best laid plans after go agley. Some's worked really well, some hasn't. So the habitat is successful for what my main concern was, which was enhancing habitat for endangered species. I've been there when there've been brown pelicans and least terns feeding in the channels. The scientific studies that have been done indicate that it's a pretty good habitat for least tern. I thought eelgrass would come back naturally. It hasn't. There's a tiny bit of eelgrass. The port and the Corps of Engineers are responsible for more, and they're working on that now. I'm happy that the work that's being done now will complete it. Funding has been difficult. It's a spectacular place to be, and it's kind of cool because it isn't really crowded. I'm disappointed that the paths haven't held up real well, but I do know that the Port of Oakland is working on a refresh for that. So it should be done. There's some nice little things like the Little Cove beaches. And then, do you want me to talk about this?
Yeah, let's talk about this. This hour.
Well, I took that old picture and said, Jesus, we could make this habitat again, and we could save money for the port and kind of reconnect West Oakland to the bay. This wasn't my idea, but I love it. The chief engineer at the port when I was there, Jerry Cerveni, was the project manager for all of this project. And you have to realize the port dredged 13 million cubic yards of material and land moved 6 million cubic yards of material. It was $800 million project. It was a huge project. And Jerry wanted a tower. There'd been a tower that he'd taken his kids up. So he came up with this and figured out a way to shoehorn it into the budget. And I just love it.
It's great for
Not my idea, but I just love it.
it's nice for birding. And it's also like you'll see families show up at the park and the kids just kind of run to this tower. It's just so cool. Every kid always has to go up something like this. So it's it makes it a very family friendly park. And it has lots of places to sit and look out at the bay. Has a really good view of downtown San Francisco. We'll see that in one of these photos. Now, Jim, you were talking about like the dredged material. And I know like the port was looking at different options for dealing with that. So you were deepening the port to 50 feet. What made the Middle Harbor an attractive solution to that problem?
Well, I wanted, and my staff really wanted to try to reuse all the material. It all could have been taken out to the ocean. And when all the dust is settled, that probably would have been cheaper. There's a deep water disposal site. But almost all the material was clean enough to use for construction purposes or for habitat purposes. So we tried to figure out a way we could restore habitat with the material, and we're successful. We used almost all of it for habitat restoration. But you could pump the material directly into Middle Harbor for about 1/10 the cost of hauling it up to Hamilton, which we did, or to Montezuma Slough, which we also did, where we also restored habitat. And for me, I worked for the Port of Oakland for 16 years. I love Oakland. I mean, it was nice to restore public access and habitat in Oakland, not somewhere 60 or 80 miles away.
Yeah, and I know like there were a lot of different interest groups that had perspectives, very valid perspectives, like people like here we have a least turn, right? People who were with Audubon Society or other environmental advocacy groups. They had things that they wanted this park to accomplish, but also people in the West Oakland community. And Jim, why don't you talk about like how it was working with these different groups of people?
Well, at the end of the day, it was fabulous. I made contacts in West Oakland, and I volunteered in schools in West Oakland, and I got to know people who just wanted to make their community better. But it was not always an easy path. The idea of putting fill back into the bay, even for habitat purposes, was very controversial when I proposed it. It was, kind of not sacred. It's conventional wisdom now. I got bloodied and beaten up moving it to that place. But the story that I guess I would like to tell is there were two people that were instrumental to this, and finding a middle point that they could both support was absolutely key. One was Arthur Feinstein, who was representing the Audubon Society, and the other was George Bolton, who was an activist in West Oakland who'd fished here when he was a kid, and he wanted fishing to come back and access to fishing to come back for his community. And so I had two separate groups, one working on the planning for the park and one working on the planning for the habitat. And these were both my employees and consultants and interest groups, and they didn't really trust each other. And I said, we're going to have to bring these two groups together. And when I decided to do that, my staff just went nuts. They said, this is all going to blow up. And George Bolton walked into the boardroom and he started to talk about our responsibilities for stewardship and to steward children. And Arthur Feinstein heard him and just got it. He realized that creating a sense of a habitat that people in West Oakland could see and see improvement was really important to the Audubon Society's mission. And we planned it for endangered species, but we also planned it for people.
Yeah, and there's a tension often between public access and habitat restoration, right?
Right. But when those two got along, it swept everything else before.
Yeah. To me, this is a story of a real win-win-win, where you have these three groups, the port, the community and the environmentalists finding common ground and being able to come up with something, giving us a park where there was none, where there wasn't any, there was a little bit of public access. We could go back to that map. There was, we go back to that. So if we go up to this Port View Park, my understanding was that that was available, that was open to the public before the Middle Harbor was created.
Correct.
And then but you added so much more space.
This is roughly the size of Lake Merritt. So there was Port View Park and the fishing pier. And out at the fishing pier, there was an observation tower that was damaged in the Loma Prieta earthquake. So we improved Port View Park. There's a nice little exhibit there about the history of this fill in the port and the area. We did that earlier, but all the rest of it came out of this project.
Yeah, so you end up giving people this park. The one thing that I would love to see is other ways for people to get to this park. I mean, there's no public transportation, so we need to figure out a way to get more people to this park, either by bike or by car. But it's out there. I understand, Jim, there's concerts and things like that happen out there sometimes.
Yes, there have been concerts. There's one of I can't remember the group that played there that was actually videoed and played on HBO.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and quite a popular band. Because it is habitat, there are some restrictions on what can be done out there.
Yeah,
and as far as the access goes, there are two, I think, future improvements. One is that underpass, which is so scary, and I ride through when there's no trucks coming. Is the port is trying to get funding to replace that, which would include much better access. And then as the Oakland Army base gets redeveloped, eventually streets will punch through into Oakland and they'll have a bay trail or a bicycle trail connection.
Yeah, my understanding, and Lee, you can jump in, and if we've talked about it, there's supposed to be a bridge that's going to be in this area, I believe, that will connect this part of the Bay Trail to Mandela Parkway, maybe. Lee, is that correct?
Yeah, there's like Jim mentioned, there's a bunch of projects to try to improve access in the West Oakland area. That 7th Street project, where the existing trail out there is definitely for the hardy at this point. They're going to definitely work on trying to make some improvements to make it a little brighter and bigger trail. But the one you're talking about, Rodney, is called the West Oakland Link, essentially, which would connect the bike path on Grand Avenue and fly over close to the toll plaza and the existing approach trail to the Bay Bridge. So the whole idea is there's so much infrastructure out there. There's railroads, there's trucks, there's all sorts of craziness going on there. The idea is to separate bicyclists and pedestrians away from all of that. So it makes it a nice, safe and attractive, hopefully, place for people to want to ride over and have a little bit of a bird's eye view as they approach the bridge. And in the long run, hopefully we'll get that connection to the west span of the Bay Bridge, and it will actually serve, hopefully, as a significant commute opportunity for people using bikes or e-bikes going from San Francisco to Oakland and vice versa.
Oh, that's a great vision, real active transportation opportunity there. So, because I when I visited the park for the first time, I was coming from this direction, and coming over on the Bay Bridge path to here, there's like a traffic light here, and then you get on Maritime, and then this is totally separate from a street that does carry a lot of trucks during the week, but you're totally separate from them. There's no risk of getting hit. I think there's another light down here. And then you have to kind of cross over to the path along 7th Street. And then there'd be a light here at the entrance to the park. Well, so let's talk about the different things you can do at Middle Harbor Park. so we were talking about birding, and I've definitely heard from a lot of people who are into birds that this is a great place to go. I have pictures of the least tern, very nice picture, actually. I think I have a credit for, yeah, Bob Gunderson, really nice picture. And you'll see also on this little beach, you'll see a lot of birds. Jim, there's a plan to really create more eelgrass habitat, right?
Correct.
And
And a little marsh. The plan, if you go back to it, always had a marsh up in the corner.
oh, this is the map.
Yeah,
There you go.
there, that was it. So up in that corner, and that had not been built, and the eelgrass has not met the standards that for success. And the circulation's good. There's a small amount of eelgrass. So they're doing planning, and what the port has done is they've reconvened the technical advisory committee, which has U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Marine Fisheries Service, Audubon Society, and so forth. And I attend. I mean, I'm no longer an employee of the Port of Oakland, but obviously I've got an emotional connection to this. It was a big part of my life for 4 or 5 years, and so the ports and the Corps of Engineers are committed to making that successful. One of the things that part of the reason that I sold this within the port was to have people committed to the habitat benefits would help the funding. And indeed, it helped the authorization, but it was still very difficult to get funding for the dredging project. It stretched out for 8, 10, 12 years, and it's not really completely done. So funding one of these projects is very tough, and building them's not easy either.
Yeah. We had a question come in. What is the role of eelgrass in the bay's ecosystem?
One of my biologists would be able to do that, would answer that better. I am actually a civil engineer. I'm a sediment guy. It's a building block. It has a kind of an ecosystem all of its own. It provides some shelter, and it provides organisms on it, and it provides shelter for small fish, and food for small fish. So what our hope is that the least tern colony on the Alameda Naval Air Station would have parent least terns that would be looking for food. And in a sheltered environment like this, you would have small fish. And indeed, you can see one in your picture with a fish in its mouth. Sarah is saying it's a nursery for herring and their eggs.
Yeah.
There's somebody who can provide a better answer than I can.
And we don't really have enough eelgrass. So wait, is this the one?
Yep.
Yeah. That's a fabulous
And
picture.
baby least terns have very small throats. You can't give them big fish. You got to give them little fish.
Yep. So it's kind of a snuff
I've just
picture.
exhausted my biological knowledge, though.
And then what, since you worked for the port all these years, what do you think of the views of the port operations? What should people be, what would they be seeing if they were looking at, when should you go is a good question too. Like, when is a good time to experience that?
Well, the best time to go is when the port had tours after they just brought the big cranes in. I went up on one of those cranes, and it's the best view in the East Bay for sure. The interesting thing about this place is, on one side, you've got commercial activity. This is where all our T-shirts and televisions and video games and things come in. On the other side, you have what I consider the Bay Area's own wilderness, the Bay. And what we tried to do is make that more valuable for habitat. So you can see both. So a lot of people like to see ships being unloaded. It takes about 40 seconds for one of those 40-ton containers to come off a ship. The guys that do it work really hard, and it's really intense, and they can only work, I think, 4-hour shifts. But it's interesting to see a ship with 3 or 4 cranes on it and just a buzzing hub of activity. And you come other times and there's nothing going on in the terminal. So they're both interesting.
It's like we're on the end of this supply chain, and this is an essential link that we know very little, most of us know very little about. There was an excellent podcast series a few years ago that I think focused on the Port of Oakland to talk about how container shipping changed the whole supply chain and how essential it was to the global economy. So maybe I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But you told me, Jim, if you come during the week, that's your best shot to see a ship being unloaded. And usually I'm going to the Middle Harbor Park on weekends, so I think I'm going to try that. What other activities would we recommend people do at the Middle Harbor? I mean, I saw someone mention in chat that it's a great place for socially distanced picnics, which kind of a good idea to be doing these days, right?
We've had picnics there with port and former port staff. I volunteer in schools now in Berkeley, and there is a stewardship program out there. So at the mole that you can see, right here, you can actually put a little sampler down into the water and pick up some mud and look at what's in it. And there's a naturalist out there. For a while, the East Bay Regional Park District was running it for the Port of Oakland. And so I went there with my first grade class, 4 or 5 years. And, you get to play in mud and you get to see organisms that live in mud. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. My wife, Sarah, took a Audubon Society class, and one of the assignments was to go to the Middle Harbor right within an hour of high tide, as the water was receding. The shorebirds return to this, I think it's this beach right here, and start feeding. And it was quite the show. So I highly recommend that. And I'm seeing some really good comments in here from those of you who have been there. But if you haven't, I definitely highly recommend to check it out. Tell your friends, and it's a very safe bike ride away. And of course, there's lots of parking if you want to drive. Anything, Jim, we should add?
Well, one of the things that was pointed out in the chat, right in the center of this, you can see the kind of the little shades there. That's a picnic area. It's great. You want to avoid really windy afternoons. It can get windy there, but in the morning it's real nice, and you get a little bit of shade, and there's plenty of picnic tables and good place to have a picnic.
Are there barbecue pits there too?
I think so.
Remember,
I thought there were, but I think there are. If someone in chat, if you know in chat, you can, I'm like 90% sure. There's also, it's worth mentioning, bathrooms, water fountains. We're always really enthusiastic about that. So, full service park.
Nice.
And we also, part of the story is all the people who were involved in creating the park. And Jim, I know it was important to you to kind of give some recognition to some of the people you worked with. So I learned a new PowerPoint technique, which is how to do like these rolling credits. And the port biologist, Jody Zaitlin, actually lives very close to me. I know her as a neighbor. I didn't know she was involved in this great effort. But Jim, this is a pretty nice legacy, I would say. Pretty nice thing to be able to say you spearheaded in your career.
Well, it's nice to come up with an idea. It's even nicer to have a team that will help you implement that idea. And the amount of construction that was involved here, the amount of technical work, these people I'm all in awe of. And as I mentioned, the George Bolton and Ellen Wyrick Parkinson in West Oakland, just people who wanted to make their community a better place. They're an inspiration for how I live now.
So you got to meet a lot of great people, and it was a lot of hard work, but it really paid off.
Yeah, well, I went gray.
Okay, well, thanks, Jim, for telling us about Middle Harbor Shoreline, and we will definitely, we want to get the word out. So tell your friends, and we'll do another show about Middle Harbor Shoreline down the road, and hopefully I'll get my poll working, and we'll see if we have a larger percentage of people who have experienced it. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the King Tide event. We had it this past weekend, and also in December. The King Tides happen around the winter solstice, when I guess the Earth is closest to the moon, and when there's high tides, the waters get pretty they go all kinds of places that we don't normally see them. And so I just grabbed a bunch of photos from, I think, the BCDC website. They've actually been soliciting photos from people. It's just like really a way of looking at what we're up against with sea level rise. And I would love to hear from people, and I'm gonna, usually like we keep you guys muted during this thing, but I'm going to ask if anybody had a chance to go during the King Tide, and if they would like to share their experiences. So if you're able to raise your hand, go ahead and do that. But if you just want to kind of speak up, we want to hear from some folks who got a chance to experience this. And while we're waiting for people to do that, I'll say that my experience, we went to the Martin Luther King Shoreline, which is in Oakland, pretty close to the Coliseum, but along the bay. And we got to see a whole bunch of ridgeway rails. And the ridgeway rail is an endangered species. They are very shy, and you don't normally see them. But with the King Tide, they really kind of didn't have too many other places to go. And there were a lot of other birding people out there. There were lots of people with cameras. It was pretty exciting to be able to see the ridgeway rails. And our photo contest tonight is going to be photos of the King Tides. So we'll show you some of those that were provided to us. But if anybody else wants to jump in and talk about their experiences with the King Tides, what were your takeaways? Where did you go? Would love to hear from folks about that. And they generally, you get them in December and January. I think by February, it's with, I think, when the moon it must be the full moon that creates the conditions that result in these King Tides. So we'll have them again next year. And I know for a lot of Bay people, this is just something like, it's really amazing. And then the flip side of this, and we're going to probably do a separate show about it, is there's also ultra low tides, which can be very interesting. Also kind of a challenge for the people who are kayaking. So yeah, the BCDC site just has lots of really interesting King Tide photos. But I will take you to, we will see some toward the end of this that were submitted just for your viewing pleasure. And it's kind of a time when you're going to be on the trail and you may not necessarily be able to get to where you plan to go. So it's really showing us places that will eventually be underwater. So it's sort of a wake-up call.
I got to say, Rodney, I haven't seen a lot of these photos. I'm just surprised. It's been a while since I've been out at a King Tide, and after a few years, I'm just amazed at how many places are being inundated just from these photos. It's all across the bay from what I can tell from these photos. It's pretty incredible. It's to the point with sea level rise at this point. Anytime you're on the shoreline, the bay trail is so impacted by and so subject to rising tides and king tides at this point, where whenever we do try to plan trails along the shoreline, that's something we have to think about now. We're thinking about where do we place the trail and how do we build it in a way so that it will either be above the expected sea level rise in the next 20, 30 years, or that it can survive being occasionally inundated every once in a while. And in a lot of places where the existing trail is, there was already a lot of planning for how do we retreat, essentially, not just the Bay Trail, but all of the different types of facilities that are impacted by this, including sanitary districts and those type of things. Hayward Regional Shoreline is one of those areas that's most severely impacted by this, and there's been a lot of planning work being done in that space right now. And they just recently, this last year, finished a plan for vision, at least, of how to deal with the retreat that you have to in that space, not just for public access and trails, but for the marshlands and also the other types of facilities that we all depend on that no one really thinks about, including our sanitary districts.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about the building of this park, and this is kind of a threat to all that, that some of these places are going to be, may not be able to sustain themselves. Jim, if you don't mind my asking, do you know of what the plan is for the Middle Harbor? Are they anticipating this at the port?
I know, it's been 16 years since I retired. I know that we didn't take sea level rise into consideration in a detailed way for Middle Harbor. We did for the construction of the terminal, but I also know that some of it's up on a old wharf. Some of it's a beach, which is a pretty good and resilient waterfront for sea level rise, and some of it's pretty high, but I imagine that some of it will be threatened.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of a game changer, and this is a way to look into the future, right? That's what the king tides really show us. And like this photo shows like a highway right next to the bay, and like Highway 101 and in 80 in the East Bay, those are going to be affected. Highway 37, of course, will be. Of course, I kind of almost look at that as good news because it means that Highway 37 will be rebuilt with a very good bike path next to it. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I do want to, we had a bunch of people that submitted photos, and we will get to our photo contest shortly. Ross Heitkamp submitted a bunch of photos that are actually sets, so we can kind of see places at low and high tide. So let me get down to those. And so it's kind of daunting. This, by the way, is the Bay Trail in Mill Valley. So you can kind of see, like, this is a very heavily used trail. That's a great photo, by the way. If I could have found a credit for this photo, I would definitely have included it. Whoever took this is a great photographer, and also a great cyclist, I would say. Yes, I don't know if I could do that.
I actually looked at it very close to see if it was you.
Yes, yeah. No, I don't. I've never really had facial hair in the Bay Area, anyway. But let me skip down to these photos from Ross. I think so. This is the Alviso boat ramp, low tide and kind of high tide. And Ross, if you're on the call and you want to unmute and tell us about these, you're welcome to do that. I think this is also in the South Bay near a bridge. I'm not going to remember the name of the bridge. Low and high tide. And then this might be Stevens Creek coming into the bay.
Mm-hmm.
So we come to our photo contest, and I just have to say, first of all, that your Bay Trail map cards are brought to you by Serena Seaton of the Bay Trail Project, and she every month gets to pick a favorite place to recommend to you guys. So she's picking Sausalito, a place that probably will be affected by sea level rise, but lovely place to visit. And, I think many of us think of it as a place where tourists like to go. It gets a lot of tourist traffic, but it is really such a lovely place. And one of the things that the pandemic brought was a reduction in tourist traffic, and you could still go to these places and really appreciate them for what they have. And the thing I love about Sausalito is the marina, and the Bay Trail model is down here, I think. So there's some really cool stuff in Sausalito. And these are the Bay Trail map cards that we give to our winners. And we have some special news tonight. We're going to have 2 winners in January because it's a 2022 is a year with a lot of 2s in it. So why not give away 2 sets of Bay Trail map cards? So that's what we're going to do. And the reason we're going to do that is because I said the contest this month would be for photos of the king tides. And 2 of the entrants had the very smart idea of giving me low and high tide pictures. So this is a low, and then this is high tide in the same location, which is in Marin. And then this is a low and high tide in the South Bay. And so I thought it would really be unfair to have the people who submitted 2 sets of photos competing against the people who only submitted 1 photo. So you're going to choose between A and B. I want you to use, I'm really sorry that the polls aren't working. This does seem like some sort of voter suppression plot, but I promise you it's not. If you could use chat and just put in A or B in chat, we're going to do the voting that way. So go ahead and put in A or B, and I'm going to tally those and award the Bay Trail map cards to the winner. So I'll give you guys about 60 seconds for that. This is actually good for, this is very transparent voting is what it is, And it's very close, actually. Oh, someone wants to see again. Hold on. So here's A, B, B, A, B, B. And I'm going to go back to my count. Hey, Ethel, can you do me a favor? And why don't you count them also? And let's make sure our counts agree. So,
Oh, jeepers.
I don't want anyone saying this is like, whatever people say. I don't want them saying this about this very important poll. Man, we're gonna have to I'm gonna have to audit this or something.
Recount.
Yeah, recount. I think I should do a recount actually. So I can just scroll to the top. All right, let's do that. So I'll do that. Let's do that. I'm gonna count them up,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna run that by you, Ethel,
Okay, I'm still counting.
and then we'll make sure we agree. So this is a little slower than the old way of doing it. What I did wrong, by the way, folks, in case you want to know why the polls are broken, is I logged on with another machine that had the same login that I was logged in for as host. And apparently when you do that in Zoom, don't do that because it basically destroys your ability to run polls. I don't know why, but it does. So a little lesson learned here on my part. We have all learned a lot about Zoom thanks to that coronavirus of ours. Oh, that's not a B. That's an And yes, it is a
Doing it.
slower way of doing
Do it a
voting.
second count.
Hand tally's always tough.
Well, it's better be better than the 2000 election. You know, we don't have months to do this. Should have like someone should just be solely, we need like a Secretary of State of Bay Trail Confidential. And then the show slowed down. So I think I see the A has 16.
Yep.
And B has 13. Does that sound right?
I got 16 and 11, but
16, 11. Either
still
way-
more an A.
Yeah, and someone wants to know, does the Supreme Court need to get involved? Gosh, I really hope not. Oh my, are you guys not allowed to unmute? Hold on. Let's see. I failed to.
Yeah, Ross mentioned a while ago that
Well,
they're not allowed to unmute right now.
Wow. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can fix that. Oh, it's probably the same result. Try it now. Can you unmute now? The other thing is I'll just make you, I'll make Ross a co-host. Apologies, because oh man, I can't make you a co-host. I have to make, okay, I'm going to make Ethel the host. That must be where we went wrong. I'm going to make you the host, Ethel, and then you're going to make me the host again, and I'll make you the co-host. And then we will, this craziness will end. All right, so Ethel is now the host.
Okay, so wait a minute, I'm doing a third recount here.
So Ethel, can you, this is what I always lecture people about. I'm always like, you shouldn't have, reason you had technical problems is because you didn't test enough. So this is me being hoisted by my own petard. But Ethel, I need you to make me the host again. So click on participants, and then where you see SF City Guides,
Yeah,
click where it says more to the right of that,
Yep.
and pull down, and you should be able to say
make host,
make host. Yeah.
change host.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm the host,
Okay,
and then I'll make you co-host. And let's see if that now allows people to unmute. So try that, Ross. In the meantime, I'm going to try to make Ross a co-host, and that will definitely allow you to unmute. And everybody, I apologize for this craziness. It's something we.
Oh, I got to unmute.
There you go, Ross.
There you go.
Speak.
Hi.
So you guys wanted to unmute and you couldn't. That's really sad. So what did it tell us? Speak up, Ross. What do you have to tell us?
Well, I don't have there's one of the pictures. B were submitted by me. They're on Stevens Creek, and they're slightly different angles, but from the same point, looking across the creek area there, where normally it's just a bunch of pickleweed and a narrow little creek channel. And then at the king tide, it just fills up all the way from one levee to the next. And there was one other picture in the set I'd sent you that was from a little different place, but you could see the levees are only about 2 or 3 feet above the top of the king tide.
Is it, so we've got this one.
Yeah,
That's
there's
from
the
you.
one I was thinking of, that you can see that the water's almost up to the height of where the Stevens Creek Trail is there on the opposite bank. It's maybe 3 feet below. This
By
was
the way,
Alviso.
I picked, you gave me a whole bunch of pictures and I just picked a set to put into the contest. So did I pick correctly?
Oh, sure. Those were good ones. So this is another spot on the Stevens Creek Trail that's, this picture is showing kind of just where the creek is normally flowing, and without any tidal effect. And then the next picture shows during the king tide from here. So when you're out in these shallow spots close to the bay, the creeks just, start flowing the opposite direction. And where I went for this last king tide was over at by Alviso there on the Guadalupe River. And boy, that river's flowing fast the opposite direction when that king tide's coming in. A lot of water moving upstream.
Yeah, it's really dramatic. I'm wondering if
So it's not as dramatic as Mill Valley, which is near where I grew up, and it floods over the Bay Trail there, and
yeah, we had those
Port of
pictures.
Oakland as well. It does that, but a different kind of dramatic here. That section of by the boat ramp. I saw a number of kayakers out there. They were getting a great ride.
Oh, you gave me a really good picture. I must have failed to put it in here of the Alviso Park. I guess I did. I neglected to put that into my deck.
That's okay. Yeah, it's the boat ramp.
Wonderful Alviso, one of our favorite places that we've discussed. So that was the first photo contest. Now we have a second photo contest of the individual pictures. So we've got 3 of those. And we will also have a Bay Trail map card winner for those. So you're going to choose between C, D, and E. And I have to be honest, I think E, they may not have understood that it was going to be about the king tides, but it's a really nice photo. So it's in the contest. And go ahead and chat once again, C, D, or E. And we will have again, I thought I might get the polls working again, but I did not succeed. So C, D, and E. So the good news is 2 sets of map cards are being awarded this month. And the bad news is that the contest is going to take a lot longer than it normally does. I think I've learned a valuable lesson on what to avoid doing in the future.
What do we have? C, D, and E now?
C, D, and E.
Okay.
Can we see the photos again? Yes, thanks for asking. Another close contest. Your votes could really matter here. Yes, I like that, Ross. I agree with that. We can't unmute again. So Sherry, I'm just going to make people co-hosts so that you can unmute. I would love to figure out. Let's see. So I ask you to unmute. You can't do it. So I'm just going to make you a co-host.
Thanks. All I had wanted to say is we couldn't see the pictures, but I wanted to let you know that.
Okay. And yeah, this is not, I don't know, I guess we live in extraordinary times, and that includes even things like Zoom polls.
Never a dull moment.
Yep. We could use a dull moment, couldn't we?
Well, see, it just goes to show you can think on your feet, right?
Yep. Well, Ethel, as I've always told you as a tour guide, I kind of look at problems as opportunities,
That's
learning
right.
opportunities. But man, this like, so I basically was trying to use my iPhone to connect because it's nice to be able to monitor what's going on. Because I'm up. This is, by the way, why you're looking at me with this background. I'm up at Tahoe, in a place known as Christmas Valley. Maybe some of you know it. It's near South Lake Tahoe. It's also a place that got very, very lucky with the Calder fire a few months ago. the fire literally jumped over the valley. It burned both sides of the valley. And because of that, I want to change the name from Christmas Valley to Passover Valley. And they're waiting to get back to me on that. I proposed some of the streets here, like, we've got Elf Lane and Santa Claus Way and all that. And I've suggested, like, Matzo Ball Court and, Moses Street, Pharaoh Alley. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. So
Okay.
going back to this poll, the second poll, I see 8 votes for C, 6 votes for D, and 2 votes for E.
I got 10 votes for C, 6 for D, and 2 for E. So C is a winner.
C wins, but don't trust me on my counts. I trust you, Ethel.
I've got the same count as Ethel.
Okay, good. C is a very interesting picture. It is. It's like not a, as a tour guide, as an art museum guide, one of the questions we often ask is, would the word beautiful describe this?
Mm.
And I don't think anyone would say, well, this is beautiful, but this is the other thing you see in the King Tide. At the Martin Luther King shoreline, we saw a lot of garbage, and it does it is kind of humbling and sad to see this, but it's also kind of letting us, telling us we're not doing a good enough job of taking care of this bay.
Yeah. Realism, right?
Yeah. So this picture was taken at the, I think it's Pier 94, a restoration site that is being, I think, I'm not going to remember who is, my wife and I have actually gone and done volunteer work here. And the person who took this photo was there as a volunteer when the King Tide was happening. Might be the Sierra Club. Am I getting that right? Lee, do you happen to know who was doing Pier 94?
I don't remember, unfortunately.
And then this bridge picture is just a fabulous picture. And
Yeah.
it might just have to be entered into another contest because I think it may have been submitted before I mentioned that it was a King Tide. The King Tide was the theme. So, so thank you to our photo contestants. The winner of A was Alita George, who was one of the hikers with the women who ran around the bay. Alita, congratulations if you were able to unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was the Dotson Family Marsh.
Oh, okay. Let me
And
go back.
yeah, so we hiked along that right at King Tide, and then we walked out to Point Pinole, and on the way back, this is what it looked like 3 hours later
Wow.
with Mount Tamalpais there.
And shame on me. I said it was taken in Marin, which now that I think about it was like
Well, across the way is Marin.
oh, you're looking at Marin, but it couldn't have been taken from Marin, right? With Mount Tam in the background. The
Yeah.
Dotson. Yeah, that's
We hiked with a new person who isn't that familiar with the Bay Trail, so I'm going to give her my Bay Trail cards.
oh, very good.
Yeah.
Because you already have a set.
Yes, I do.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's a happy outcome. And the Dotson Family Marsh is another fabulous place that we will have to talk about on a future show. And Alita, were you doing this as part of like another circumnavigation of the bay that's just started with the hiking group?
No, I just went with friends just to see the King Tide and go to Dotson Family Marsh because it's so beautiful, that new boardwalk that they put in, and Point Pinole is just a great section of the Bay Trail.
It really is. And it's,
Yeah, no, I just went with my husband and a friend.
and I just love the story behind it because, when the first time I went, I thought, oh, the Dotson Family Marsh, the Dotson family must be some wealthy family that just has lots of land and they decided to donate this. Very, very nice of them. But that's not the story at all. They were, Reverend Dotson was the pastor of a nearby congregation, and he advocated tirelessly to protect this area from development. And then his son
Whitney
was on,
Dotson.
Whitney Dotson was on the East Bay Regional Parks Board, I believe.
That's correct. Yep.
And this is like just a beautiful way to recognize that legacy. And it's a great place.
Mhm.
So we will talk about that on future shows. So I think we are at a little bit past 8:30, so it's time for happy trails. And then we will do Q&A, and we're going to find a way to let you guys unmute, especially you, Paco. We definitely need to hear from Paco. So hang in there, folks.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Until we meet again.
So that's our official show, and I really want to thank Jim in particular for being our guest today. We really, and also Jim, I just want to tell you that park is a fabulous legacy. I know that you love it, and I just want you to know there's a lot of other people who love it too. And our goal is to make sure there will be even more in the future. So I am first of all going to, if Paco is still out there, we always need to hear from Paco. So Paco, I'm making you a co-host, which will enable you to unmute. What did you think of tonight's show, Paco?
Oh, actually, it was so fantastic. And by the way, Nikki says hello to you.
Oh, Nikki from Community Living Campaign.
Yeah.
That's
we're
great.
gonna have a show on Friday, Dia de los Reyes. Too.
Really? So that's
Yeah.
a Community Living Campaign. I will put information about that show in my Friday email for those who want to tune in. But many of you out there know that Paco, you are a volunteer. Is that right? A volunteer with Community Living Campaign, or you work for
Oh,
them?
I'm an attendee too.
You're an
You know what?
attendee.
It's always snowing in Tahoe.
It is. We've had wonderful snow. So great, Paco. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to seeing you very soon again. Anything else to add? You're gonna make your way over to the Middle Harbor Shoreline Park one of these days?
You know what? I haven't gone to that park during this pandemic. But probably next time when the pandemic is over.
Okay, well, let's hope that's very soon. Thanks, Paco.
You know what? This time it's gonna be like an Omicron.
Yeah, well, we're kind of in the middle of that. Hopefully everyone is vaccinated and wearing masks and being careful. And I see a question out there. Someone wanted me to talk about the vacation I took. I was away for much of December. We have an electric car. We drove it to Los Angeles and then to Arizona, and learned a lot about how you keep an electric car charged and still do the things you want to do. And it's something you have to think more about than with a gasoline car, because you can't count on opportunities to recharge being all over the place. They're not. But we were able to manage it really well. There was never a time when we couldn't go someplace we wanted to. And we really enjoyed driving around in our electric car. And even like the brakes when you charge are actually, it's actually a welcome thing to drive for maybe 3 hours, take a break, charge your car. And we did get to go to some really great parks. We went to the Grand Canyon, the South Rim. I've never been to the South Rim of the Grand Canyon. That was fabulous. And then we went to this place called Oregon Pipe Cactus National Park, which is right on the Mexican border. In fact, our cell phones told us that we were connected through a Mexican telecommunications company. That's how close we were. So, and it's a fabulous place for the saguaro cacti. And then my wife put this in chat. We went to Pinnacles National Park and we got to see California condors. Maybe I'll put a picture of the California condor in my email on Friday so you guys can see that. It was really great. Let's see, who else would like to speak up? If you put your name in chat, I will make it so you can unmute. And I apologize for the craziness of what I seem to have done with Zoom. Like I said, a learning experience. You can also, if you have questions, you can type them into chat, especially if you had questions about the Middle Harbor shoreline, we'd be happy to address those. And if not, we can call it a wrap if we must, but I want to thank you guys for bearing with us. And I'm not blaming the technology. I will take responsibility. I do think I found a Zoom bug is kind of what it was, but that's how it goes. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll look forward to having you back in February for another great Bay Trail Confidential show. See you
By
then.
the way, your next show is coming up on Monday.
Well, that is true.
Your art
My
viewing.
art viewing adventure program is going to be about a fabulous art gallery that's right on the Bay Trail called Pier 24. It's a great place for photography, and it's actually closed at the moment. But we're gonna talk about some of the photographs that were recently on display there, and kind of how you can go and enjoy that place. So, Paco, are you planning to attend on Monday?
Oh yes, Rodney. And
Good.
also Richie's show at
Well,
6 o'clock.
Richie, who he actually had tuned in earlier. I don't think he's on anymore, but he will be doing a really great show on rock history, and it's going to be about the Beatles documentary, Get Back. It'll be like his
That's the first part, Rodney.
Get Back and Let It Be. Yeah, part 1 and part 2. He'll be doing part 1. If that's a fabulous documentary. Paco, have you gotten a chance to see it?
Oh, I saw it in a calendar. I got my CLC activity calendar already last Monday.
Oh, good.
But I've watched that before, that Beatles.
Yep. I love the Beatles. It should be a great show.
I love playing that.
All right. Well, thanks again. Thank you, Ethel, for as always being my co-host. Lee, great to have you with us. And Jim, thanks again. We will call it a wrap and see you guys in a month.
My pleasure. Thanks for shining the light.
Yeah. Happy trails, Jim.
Monday and happy trails.
Happy trails.
Bye,
That's it.
everybody.